Welcome to SobelCo Insights. In this session, we'll be discussing research and development expenses. Hi, my name is Brad Muniz. I'm the partner in charge of assurance practice at SobelCo. With me today is Scott Cost, Senior Manager in our tax practice. So Scott, research and development, I'm going to refer to as R&D so that the people know when we say R&D. Now, I'm familiar with R&D. Accounting says research and development expenses have to be expensed as incurred. That's it. Nothing else to think about.
That's you guys. So, for tax purposes, we do things a little differently.
You can join us if you want.
I've been there, done that.
But I know that there was some tax treatment in the past that was done a particular way, and I'm hearing that there's some significant changes happen.
Yes. Effective 1/1/22, how we treat R&D expenses is radically different than the way it used to be treated. Previously, under the old rules, we would expense R&D expenses. We deduct them currently in the year incurred. We could make an election, if we chose to, in order where we capitalize them and then amortize them over a 15-year period.
15 years.
Yeah. Okay. Effective 1/1/22, that's all changed. We're now going to be required to capitalize all R&D expense and amortize them. If R&D is conducted within the United States, you get a 5-year amortization period.
Okay.
If you are conducting your R&D outside, then you're going to be having a 15-year amortization period.
So this is really tough, and I'm sorry, I'm going to keep taking down my road. Okay, and for the people out there, this is a tax session, but I'm trying to tie it because you have financial statements too that you have to concern yourself with. Still, for financial statements, for what we refer to as GAAP purposes, they're being expensed, which you used to do. You could elect certain ways.
Yes.
But you're saying now that it's required to capitalize those expenses.
Absolutely. And one only thing we're going to have is that's going to generate what they refer to as an M1 or an M3 difference depending on the form that you're using, and that will be reflected there.
Which is referred to as a book tax difference between them.
Yeah.
So that's going to be, for some companies, and we deal with some companies together, mutual clients, they're fairly significant expenses that we're going to have.
Yeah.
That they will not be getting a deduction for this year.
Yeah. And I don't know if they're aware of it.
And just to repeat what you said, 1/1/22. So it's January 1 of 22 is effective this year for calendar year clients. This year we are, depending on when you're viewing this, we are months into the year already.
Mm-hmm.
And if people are thinking that, I've been incurring these expenses throughout the year, I'll take the deduction like I always did, and we're not even talking about the credit yet. We're just talking about the deduction itself. They will not get that deduction as they had in the past, or they could have elected not to anyway. And in the past, you said it was a 15-year amortization election, but now it's domestic costs.
It's a mandatory 5-year amortization period.
Mandatory.
You have to capitalize and amortize over a 5-year period for domestic R&D, and 5 years domestic R&D, 15 years for anything conducted outside of the United States.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
That's why if you're a company with foreign operations, you might want to consider bringing the R&D in country. In the United States.
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't even thought about it that way. Right. So if you have multiple locations, we have them, but they're more sales offices. But if they're performing R&D outside of the U.S., you might want to bring that inside, which is the goal of the U.S. to get the labor and the resources done within the United States.
Yep. And one change, one of the things that could be detrimental is that if you have a project that's currently going on, and you come to the realization that this project isn't going to be feasible. You can't, and you cease the project. You cannot write off those capitalized costs. You have to continue allowing them to amortize.
So sorry. So let's go down that path. And I haven't even thought about that because we also have impairment on our side. So what you're saying is, we're a large pharmaceutical company, and they invest a lot in R&D. They have to capitalize those expenses now, and at some point they determine this drug is not going to be able to get to market in some way. For some reason, it's not going to pass the FDA, and they can't just say, okay, boom, write off all those expenses, we're done. You have to continue the life, even though.
Even though the project is done and you're no longer continue doing research in a particular area, those costs that you capitalize, you must let them run its course.
Okay, that's very interesting, because in the first year you could determine we're not going to go down this road anymore. All right. The tax effect. What is the tax effect of an R&D project if it's no longer feasible?
Well, that's basically what I was just.
That's
That's
it.
the same. That's it.
Okay, all right. So you blend that into there. So there's no. It doesn't affect the credit in any way. It's just the expenses.
It's just the expenses.
All right. So the big thing that I deal with, and when I talk to the clients, a lot of times I'm with them, and for us, for disclosure, we have to say what their R&D expenses are, and there's always this discussion what R&D is, and for financial statement purposes, I'm not saying we're flying loose here, but we're like, okay, put in there what you think is in there, depending upon the materiality. I know for taxes, it's kind of quite particular what qualifies as R&D expenses.
Right. It's going to be any expenses that would normally be deductible, not capitalizable, normally. Okay, so you're talking about wages, supplies that may go into the R&D. Okay, in addition, for the purposes of the deduction, you can also take overhead. You can take depreciation, administrative costs, and patent costs. Okay, those can all be included in your R&D expense, or in this case, the deduction that we're going to turn around and capitalize.
Ooh.
Okay.
So that's a lot now that's going to have to require to be put on the effective balance sheet of the tax return, not of the financial statements.
Now you also have to keep in mind, R&D, you just can't start throwing anything let the kitchen sink in here, because they have to pertain into R&D itself. There has to be an element of uncertainty. Okay, if you know the outcome of a project before going into it, well, then there's no real R&D. It's
right.
So you can't take these as R&D costs. It has to be something that's technological in nature. You're looking to improve a process, a product, a component, and you're trying to learn something new technologically about this.
Right, and I know that there are specialists out there that get involved with this.
Yes.
And if you have an intricate process, you might want to talk with somebody.
Exactly. They have engineers involved that are very intimate into this in the area. Depending on what you do.
Right.
If you're manufacturing widgets, there could be there's a firm out there somewhere where they have engineers who are they know widgets.
It's almost like the cost segregation studies.
Exactly.
There's engineers, there are specialists that do this. There are people that are more familiar with it than accountants. And we're good at understanding the tax law, the accounting requirements, to be able to apply them, but getting into the details of it. And this is something probably, I'm not asking you to speculate, but this is something the IRS loves to pick on.
Oh yeah, and I'm gonna go into that in a minute, because you and I on camera were talking about R&D credits. Okay, and the R&D credit is not really significantly impacted by this change. Okay, like I said, it's the R&D expense. Okay, with the R&D credit, all those expenses I said you can take for purposes of the deduction, there's some of them you can't take in calculation of the credit, such as the overhead, the patent cost, any of your depreciation. You can't take those for calculation of the R&D credit. Okay. Now, previously, what would happen with the R&D credit is that you would have to reduce your expense by the amount of the credit being taken, unless you elected to take a reduced credit. Then you didn't have to. What's happening now is if you don't make the election for the reduced credit, you would have to reduce the amortizable basis of those costs.
Glad it's his side and not mine that's doing this. You want to come back to audit? It's a little bit easier.
So
just expense. Okay.
So what's happening now with the credit is there's going to be, and this is something that's coming down now, is increased substantiation requirements. The IRS is going to start. First of all, if you don't have the expenses in your R&D that you capitalized, you can't include that
As part of the credit.
as part of the credit.
So I mean, I'm not getting political here at all. This is not a political show. But with what we hear, 87,000 new agents that might be coming on. This might be something that they could be looking at.
Yeah, it won't take him a few years to get online with it, so.
What's my retirement date?
Exactly.
But this is something I've heard it in the past, because R&D has been out for a while now, and I know that in the past the IRS was big on this, and I can't imagine this is something that would be easy. So, I mean, I thought that that was just a simple question of what qualifies for it, and it's not a simple area.
No.
Software, I know in the past has been something particular as it relates to software.
With RevProc 2000-50, we had the option with software development costs of expensing it or capitalizing it and amortizing it. Software development costs, you could amortize it. Originally, you were able to amortize it over 16 months from the date that it was first put into production.
Okay.
Okay, or from the development date. From the development date. 60 months from its development date. Or it'd be 36 months from the date first placed into service.
Okay.
Okay, if you had software costs incurred by a third-party developer, you would amortize that over 36 months from the date put into service.
Wow. Now, I mean,
those are the old rules under RevProc 2000-50.
oh, and so this has changed now.
This is changing that. Now they're putting it all. They're taking the software development costs and they're treating it the same as the R&D costs. And again, you no longer have an expensing option. You have to capitalize, and you're going to amortize 5 years internal, or 15 if it's outside the United States.
And again, thinking about the two different sides, because I'm dealing with the clients or the companies at the financial end, and there's specific accounting requirements for capitalizing software, and it's very, very small window what you capitalize for accounting purposes. But they spend a lot of money in software development. And so there's, again, now a very good chance that we're going to say for financial purposes, you can only capitalize this small amount, but for tax purposes, you have to capitalize this amount and then amortize it over a certain amount of time. Okay, yeah, it's a lot of great stuff. So you talked about the effect of the change on the R&D credit. It's not a significant change.
No, it's not really going to be significant to the credit itself.
But it's the deduction that people thought that they've had over the years. And this also, for the software companies that I was referring to before, there's a lot of NOLs that get built up in the early years.
Right.
This could affect the buildup of the NOLs. Now, they'll have a tax asset, a future deduction, but they don't have the NOLs.
Right. And also, if this is not a refundable credit.
Okay.
Okay. So if you have net operating losses, you're not going to get the benefit of the credit in that year.
Right.
What's going to happen is it's going to get carried forward 20 years.
Right. Okay. Alrighty. So that's a lot of stuff, and I think there's probably a lot more to even consider. Just putting this into effect is going to be really intricate. And now there's not a lot of time left to really focus on this, and I think that people really have to start putting more attention towards that. So thank you, Scott. I really appreciate that. Thank you for watching SobelCo Insights. Please visit our YouTube channel for additional videos.